Symbolic meeting. The Kentucky clerk jailed for upholding marriage meets privately with Pope Francis. Russian airstrikes. Are the strikes targeting ISIS terrorists or just supporting Syria's president? Woman executed. Despite an appeal for mercy from the Pope, Georgia puts a convicted murderer to death. And a sacred construction zone. A priest sculpts mosaic art in shrines across the world. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, September 30th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. It was a well-kept secret. While in Washington last week, Pope Francis met with the Kentucky clerk who was jailed for upholding marriage. Kim Davis, an apostolic Christian, refused to license same-sex marriages despite the Supreme Court ruling legalizing them nationwide. She spent 5 days in jail until her deputies agreed to issue the licenses without her approval. Davis's parents are lifelong Catholics who now have the rosaries the Holy Father gave her during their meeting. Matt Staver with Liberty Counsel representing Kim Davis. Matt, who set up this meeting between Kim Davis and Pope Francis?
Well, I won't go into detail as to who or all the different mechanisms that brought this meeting about, but I will say that it was a private meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican Embassy in Washington, D.C., and certainly when the Pope meets with anyone in a private setting as this, it was not a group meeting. He and his staff know who they are meeting and have approved of that particular meeting. This meeting occurred Thursday afternoon in Washington, D.C., and it was a private meeting between Pope Francis and Kim and Joe Davis.
Were you with the Davises before or after their meeting?
Yes, I was with Kim and Joe Davis immediately before and immediately after the meeting with Pope Francis.
Did she share at all what the Pope said to her?
She did, and she said that when Pope Francis came in, he held out his hand. He asked her to pray for him, which she then clasped his hand. She said she would. She asked Pope Francis to pray for her, and he said he would. He encouraged her, and he told her specifically in his words, stay strong. And all of the meeting was in English. They embraced while they were there. He then gave Kim and Joe Davis 2 rosaries, a black one and a white one, and presented those to them at the meeting in the Vatican Embassy.
Matt, how and why was this meeting kept secret for nearly a week?
We wanted to certainly respect Pope Francis's visit to the United States. He obviously had planned this meeting and the broad brush messages that he gave at the meetings that he attended and the masses that he performed. We did not want this to be a focus of Kim Davis, nor did Kim Davis want this to be a focus of her, and we didn't want it to distract. So once the Pope's visit was complete, once he had been back to Rome, we felt it was appropriate at that point in time in consultation to release the information about the visit.
With the Pope clearly in her corner, what does this do for Kim's case?
Well, you know, the Pope has mentioned both generally while he was here and certainly by this meeting that he is a very strong advocate of religious freedom. He said it's a human right. He said that on the plane with the papal staff that were being, or the press that were with the papal plane. He said that it was a human right. It's a human right even of governmental officials, even in the issuance of these licenses, and that it's a right of everyone. So I think that is a strong message that is sent not only by his general messages while he was here, but by his specific private meeting with Kim Davis.
What an interesting development. Matt Staver with Liberty Counsel, the representative of Kim Davis. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt.
Thank you. My pleasure.
To find out what the Vatican is saying or not about this meeting, we go to our Alan Holdren in Rome. Alan, is there any official confirmation that this meeting actually took place?
Well, Brian, the Vatican spokesman, Father Lombardi, said today that he can't deny that the meeting may have taken place, but he's not going to add any more details. He's not going to give any more information. It could be possibly that he doesn't have any more information at this point. The Pope was participating in the general audience this morning. He may not have been reachable for more comment, or he may not have wanted to give more comment. But in the past, when Father Lombardi says something like this, it is, in fact, that the event has taken place. There's just no more to add.
Pope Francis did discuss this issue on the plane. Did he get into this specific case at all?
He didn't get into specifics, Brian. He was asked if he supported people in situations like that of Kim Davis. He said that he supports people in their human right of being able to act in good conscience. He said that everybody has this right, including government officials.
Alan Holdren, who was on the papal plane going from Philadelphia to Rome and heard that himself. Alan, thanks for joining us from Rome.
Thank you, Brian.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. For the first time, Russia says its jets are dropping bombs on Islamic State positions in Syria, but there is controversy over who is actually being hit by these airstrikes. Jason Calvi is at the White House tonight with that story. Jason?
Brian, Russia says their bombs targeted ISIS vehicles and warehouses, but the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, an activist group, says at least 27 people were killed, including 6 children. Today, the White House weighs in. Russia says it's preemptively going after terrorists in Syria.
To
act preventively, to fight and eliminate militants and terrorists on territories that are already occupied by them, not wait till they come to our home.
Putin says Russia is responding to a request from Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The civil war in his country has left 250,000 dead and forced millions to flee their homes. Assad, a Russian ally, is accused of killing his own people.
The leader that they have propped up for years is losing his grip on power. And I think that's a pretty clear indication that Russia is not flexing its muscles when it comes to Syria. Right now, they are trying to prop up an investment that's about to go south.
We may also see eventually a kind of re-emergence of the Assad regime, because obviously that's what Russia wants.
This video, released by Syrian opposition, claims to show Homs, Syria, where the Russian airstrikes hit.
These strikes near the city of Homs is not under control of ISIS, of the Islamic State. So already we are seeing the true intentions of Vladimir Putin.
The Defense Secretary Ash Carter says it appears the airstrikes did target areas where ISIS isn't even located. He says Russia's approach is doomed to fail. Brian?
Jason Calvi at the White House, thank you. And on Capitol Hill, with just hours to spare, Congress avoids a government shutdown. Democrats helped embattled House GOP leaders pass the measure by a sweeping 277 to 151 vote. The Senate passed the legislation earlier, that vote 78 to 20. Debate this year was delayed by lawmakers who demanded that the bill be used to defund Planned Parenthood. President Obama must sign the bill by midnight to keep the government fully funded. House Speaker John Boehner's successor will be elected a week from tomorrow. Boehner announced his resignation Friday right after welcoming Pope Francis to the U.S. Capitol. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is first in line for the top spot. Conservatives tried to draft South Carolina's Trey Gowdy, but Gowdy dropped out late yesterday. Meanwhile, Italy's prime minister expresses his country's commitment to help immigrants making their way across Europe. Matteo Renzi told the United Nations General Assembly erecting fences and walls to keep migrants out of Europe is intolerable. Just this week, the Italian Coast Guard rescued about 1,000 more migrants at sea trying to reach Italy from Libya. Italian police found 2 smugglers from Gambia who confessed to piloting the rubber dinghies. Georgia's only female death row inmate is executed, the first execution of a woman in 7 decades. This happened overnight, despite a letter on behalf of Pope Francis asking that her life be spared. Wyatt Goolsby is here tonight with that story.
Brian, Georgia prison officials confirm 47-year-old Kelly Gissendaner died by lethal injection just after midnight. She had been on death row for almost 2 decades after being found guilty of conspiring to have her husband killed. Despite the guilty verdict, many argued against the death penalty.
For her strength.
Supporters of Kelly Gissendaner prayed outside a Georgia prison, hoping to save her life. Her daughter Kayla was among them.
We want y'all to know that we are still fighting. Do not lose your faith. This is not over.
But Kayla's mother was put to death around 12:21 this morning. Witnesses say she wanted her children to know she died singing Amazing Grace. Kayla says her mother had changed in the years since 1997 when Kelly Gissendaner convinced her lover to kill her husband Douglas. His parents and siblings have not been as forgiving. More than 90,000 people signed a petition asking the governor to stop the execution, and Gissendanner's lawyers made appeals to the state and the Supreme Court to stop or at least postpone the death sentence. Gissendanner also received support from the Holy Father. In a letter, the Vatican's ambassador made an urgent appeal on the Pope's behalf for the commutation of the death sentence of Miss Kelly Gissendanner. The letter comes less than a week after the Pope called on Congress to end the death penalty.
I am convinced that this way is the best, since every life is sacred.
The Vatican's ambassador said in no way do they want to minimize the gravity of the crime, but they say stopping the sentence would have better expressed justice and mercy. The Archbishop of Atlanta, Georgia, has voiced his support of Pope Francis' position. He also sent a letter to the state's parole board. Gissendanner had 2 previous execution dates postponed, one due to a winter storm, the other because of problems with the chemicals that were to be used in her lethal injection. Brian.
Wyatt Goolsby, thank you. Coming up, parishioners clean up vicious vandalism to a newly ordained saint's shrine. And Pope Francis explains the symbolism of his flight from Cuba to the U.S. last week. The Holy Father appearing rested and energized this morning at his general audience, greeting thousands in St. Peter's Square. Thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and just days after Pope Francis canonized Junipero Serra here in D.C., Vandals strike California's Carmel mission. That is the home of the shrine of now Saint Junipero Serra. The Diocese of Monterey tells News Nightly, quote, "We're sad and disappointed at the vandalism. Who did it or why, we don't know and won't speculate. What we do know is that we will continue to celebrate the new sainthood of Father Serra." Dr. Ruben Mendoza, an archaeologist and expert on St. Junipero Serra, joining us from Seaside, California. Ruben, can you describe the attacks and the timing and why that's significant?
Yes, on Sunday morning, I'd gone out to the Carmel mission, otherwise known as San Carlos Borromeo, and when I arrived, I noticed security officers, sheriff's department, and I noticed that the statue of Junipero Serra had been damaged. The cross at the top of the staff had been broken away. I saw photographs in which the statue had been overturned, smashed, and then they poured green paint all over it. Paint was then splashed all over the front doors of the mission basilica, and then several Native American monuments, one in particular related to Old Gabriel, had paint poured over the top of it. Because it was a marble monument, that was probably the most significantly damaged of all the monuments there. The Serra statue was resurrected and is now being repaired.
So how did the parishioners respond to this?
They responded famously. They immediately mobilized. They came into the church early that day before many of the parishioners showed up for the Serra Mass that was intended for that morning. And they began pressure washing monuments, cleaning paint away, removing graffiti and other things that had been part of the vandalism.
Is there still anger over this figure of Father Serra, now Saint Serra, and what's being done to address it?
Well, many people have moved on, but there are the same, I'd say there are about 5 individuals in the state who have been the most vocal, and a lot of their commentaries have been either anti-Catholic, Hispanic, et cetera, and these individuals don't seem to have been able to give up their concerns for the fact that Serra was canonized. So clearly, the hate speech that's been involved in some of this is clearly a focal point, and I believe prompted the attack.
But what are you doing there as a group to try to address this division between the way Father Serra is taught in the schools especially?
Well, in particular, for example, the California Catholic Commission and the bishops have all come together with the idea of working to revamp the mission museums so that they reflect more of the Native American traditions, and they're looking to try to push for the revision of state textbooks so that we see more of an inclusion of the Native American experience under the missionaries.
Dr. Ruben Mendoza joining us from Seaside, California by Skype. Thank you, Dr. Mendoza.
Thank you.
And Pope Francis calls his recent flight from Cuba to the United States symbolism of the diplomatic bridge being built between these two countries.
Llegué a Cuba como misionero de la misericordia.
The Pope saying he went to Cuba as a missionary of mercy. Reflecting on his 10-day pilgrimage, Francis says, quote, "God always wants to build bridges. It is we who build walls, and walls fall down always." The Pope also praised the U.S. for not renouncing its religious roots despite its economic development. Mike Gonzalez, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, is with us. Mike, at the UN this week, we heard some Latin American leaders hailing this better relations between the U.S. and Cuba. One from Ecuador even saying he hopes that Guantanamo Bay will be returned to Cuba. As a guy who grew up in Cuba, you were there till you were 12. What's it like watching this going on?
Well, I will answer as an American. My interest is American national interest, and it's really troubling to see our enemies, Correa Morales, praising us at the UN. When your enemies are praising you and your allies are concerned, and believe me, I meet with a lot of officials from allied countries that are very concerned about U.S. foreign policy, we have a problem.
So the U.S. could possibly abstain on a crucial vote on this embargo. Nothing like this has ever happened before.
People at the UN say they don't remember a state, a nation ever abstaining from a vote against itself. And if it is indeed true that the Obama administration will order its ambassador to abstain on the vote against the embargo because he is so petty as to want to castigate Congress at a world forum, this will be yet a new low.
Kind of embarrassing for the United States. If the embargo is lifted, would the Cuban people benefit, in your opinion?
No, the Cuban people will not benefit. Any American company that has business in Cuba will not be able to hire its own workers, will not be able to pay its own workers. Indeed, the Cuban government, I think, gets 91 cents out of every dollar. The Cuban worker gets 9 cents, I think, or 10 cents on every dollar in salary. And what we'll be doing is we'll be helping the Castro family. Castro's son-in-law is in charge of Gaesa, which is the holding company, one of the largest holding companies in Latin America, which owns about 80–90% of the Cuban economy. Every time you play golf, every time you stay in a hotel, every time you take a plane in Cuba, you're putting money into the military. And why would you want to play golf in a police state, for heaven's sakes?
Is there any possibility that you could be wrong on this stuff and that this police state might actually change?
You know, I covered China for many years. I lived in Hong Kong for 8 years. I first went to China in 1988, not 10 years after Deng Xiaoping first put in his reforms. I believed that this was going to happen. I believed that economic reform was going to lead to political reform. It's been 40 years and it hasn't happened.
So that's kind of formed your opinion on this one, too.
Absolutely.
Especially as a Cuban American. Mike Gonzalez, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, Planned Parenthood denies stats, showing it does more abortions and less actual health care for women. And a priest in a jumpsuit fashions mosaics and shrines at Fatima, Lourdes, and now Washington, D.C. Today, September 30th, is the Feast of St. Jerome, Doctor of the Church. The 4th century saint was one of the most learned fathers of the Western Church, the patron of school children. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. During testimony on Capitol Hill this week, questions to Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards were raised about statistics provided by Americans United for Life. Committee Chair Jason Chaffetz referred to this graphic from the pro-life group. It shows a reduction in breast exams and a rise in abortions by Planned Parenthood. Richard denies the stats.
I pulled those numbers directly out of your corporate reports.
Oh, excuse me, my lawyers are informing me that the source of this is actually Americans United for Life, which is an anti-abortion group, so I would check your source.
Then we will get to the bottom of the truth of that.
Republicans in the House trying to build a case for ending federal funding of Planned Parenthood. Ovide Lamontagne, General Counsel for Americans United for Life. It is a pro-life group, not an anti-abortion group, right?
Correct, Brian.
They always get that one wrong.
That's right.
So Cecile Richards said Chaffetz should check his source. Your organization was the source. Where did your numbers come from?
Well, thank you for having me on the program to help clarify this. These statistics are out of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America's annual reports dating back through before 2006, but the statistics on that chart come from 2006 through the 2013-2014 annual reports. Those are Planned Parenthood's numbers, and what they show dramatically is that Planned Parenthood's share of the abortion marketplace in America has increased from 20% to over a third, and yet their cancer screening services, the other healthcare services have declined by more than half. They are a pro-abortion organization. And what's interesting, Brian, about this is that Cecile Richards appeared to be very facile with some numbers, but completely ignorant about others, I think consciously so. When she was asked by the committee, what percentage of your revenues are abortion-related, she couldn't answer that question.
Or didn't.
And refused to do it because she knows that there's the large percentage of their income is from abortion. And they are a pro-abortion organization. A lot of Americans don't know that. Don't know that Planned Parenthood is the largest abortion provider in the country, over 327,000 abortions last year.
Well, they're getting to know it a little bit better thanks to these undercover videos, but does this testimony show a disconnect between Richards and what's actually going on in these Planned Parenthood facilities?
Well, absolutely. Cecile Richards does not want to admit what is actually going on at the Planned Parenthood Federation of America clinics across this country. Her highest-ranking officials, like Deborah Nucatola, the head abortionist of Planned Parenthood, who reports to her, was in graphic detail explaining how she harvests baby body parts. Brian, Cecile Richards knows what's going on, and she's claiming she doesn't, or she's claiming ignorance, and that's willful blindness. Planned Parenthood Federation of America, top to bottom, the entire enterprise, it should be liable and held liable for any violations of crimes. We think at least 5 to 6 federal laws have been, at least there's probable cause that have been violated here. But putting aside the law, this is just abhorrent, immoral, unethical behavior by the nation's largest abortion provider. And our statistics hold up. AUL.org contains a number of reports on Planned Parenthood activities over the years, the most recent one being the Mega Center report. We call it the New Leviathan.
Hopefully she'll check her source on those.
Hopefully so, because we
stats.
stand by those numbers, Brian.
Ovide Lamontagne, General Counsel for Americans United for Life. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Well, the St. John Paul II National Shrine here in Washington puts the finishing touches on its beautiful new chapel today. Named for the saint's first papal letter, Redemptor Hominis, the chapel is lined with mosaics of iconic biblical scenes. Catherine Szeltner introduces us to the priest behind these mosaics.
A priest's work is many things. It can even include this. For Father Marko Rupnik, the construction zone is his office. The native of Slovenia has installed mosaics in over 130 shrines and churches, from Fatima, Portugal to Lourdes, France. His first major order came from St. John Paul II himself.
He was for me some kind of conversion,
making him the perfect fit to work on the chapel in DC's JP2 shrine. The Jesuit says the saint shaped his work.
He said our church, our faith became too much rationalistic. We just teach, but the people has right to see.
He works hard to bring that vision to life.
Is there a piece you especially want to point out?
Oh, I think that one of favorites for me is this one. No? This is the episode of Epiphany.
This priest crafts theology into his art. One mosaic depicts the Tower of Babel. Father Rupnik explains why people's faces are covered with stones as they try to become like gods.
And this is some kind of losing of humanity, losing of faces, losing of relationship.
The Knights of Columbus sponsor the John Paul II Shrine. The group agrees. Father Rupnik's work carries on the JP2 mission.
St. John Paul II, in his famous 1999 letter to artists, spoke about the role of sacred art as opening up the believer to the mystery of revelation and to the wonder of creation.
With his work, Father Marko Rupnik paves a way for faith to grow. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Beautiful art. Thank you, Catherine. Until tomorrow, for our EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Tonight, we leave you with photos from today's general audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican. Good night. God bless you.